We are back, the dynamic duo, to talk about the major fire sale going on with our Calgary Flames.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jess Belmosto, and I have stolen Nick Zararis back from our rivals in Edmonton. He's back. We've got to talk about the Andrew Mangiapane trade, along with everything else that's kind of leading up to the draft tonight. And Nick, how are you doing?
The Andrew Mangiapane news went very sadly in the group chat with me and my friends who have gone to Devil's Flames for 4 straight years now. That's been our thing. Dante paid $250 to rush ship a Mangiapane jersey from Cool Hockey before the game last year. Very sad times for the boys.
It stinks. And we're going to get into that on today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. Your team every day. I think this one stings because, we all knew it was going to happen, but I wasn't expecting it while I'm just hanging out watching Instagram Reels.
The thing that really stinks about this is Mangiapane is like the textbook best case scenario. You draft a guy late, you bring him along slowly, he clearly figures out his role at the NHL level, has a career year on a team that surges, that plays a bit above what they actually are because everything humanly possible goes right for them. They give him the bridge deal to take him up to unrestricted free agency, and the team nosedives. His role changes, the team's style of play changes, and pretty much everything that can go wrong does go wrong. I don't think it's frustrating because in my head, Mangiapane's worth a lot more than a mid-second round pick next year.
Mm-hmm.
The draft is this weekend. If you told me they did this for pick 35 Saturday, okay, that makes a little bit more sense to me because they need to do it right now. They very well could have held on to Mangiapane into the season. They could have retained salary and turned him into what Blake Coleman was that year. The Lightning traded for him from the Devils, where they got a first-round pick in exchange for Blake Coleman. Those types of players will always have value. They will always be important to contending teams. And that's why I'm also surprised it was Washington out of everybody that traded for him.
Yeah, I was shocked it was Washington because, they just took on PLD's horrific contract for however many years are left on that. 7, I think, or whatever it is. But now they're taking on Mangiapane's $5.8 million for 1 year. But what are you doing? Because I feel like the Capitals are very much in a phase where they need to be doing what the Flames are doing and getting younger and restocking your cabinet. And Mangiapane's a great player, but I don't know what the goal is. Okay,
so to answer your question, this is my working theory. The Capitals know they are going to be hot ass very soon. Yeah. They know the minute Ovechkin retires, nobody is going to care about that team at all. TJ Oshie is probably medically retiring after this season. Nick Backstrom is probably medically retired. The only real DNA connecting them to the Stanley Cup team at this point are Tom Wilson and John Carlson. That's really it. Other than that, pretty much everybody has moved on, and the Capitals exist solely to get Ovechkin closer to the goal record and then to break the goal record. Probably happens 2 seasons from now. Then once that happens, they are going to be bad. If you are going to be bad, it doesn't hurt to take swings. Whether or not they keep Mangiapane or they try and flip him, that we'll figure out as their season goes along. But PLD, for them, it's real simple. Either Dubois plays better and they have a marketable player on a really bad team, or he's terrible and the team is terrible and it doesn't matter anyway. You got to reach the cap floor eventually. You got to have guys on your team, even if your team isn't good. So for BLD, I get it. I would not have staked. I wouldn't have done that, but I understand what they're trying to do. Mangiapane's a useful player. They'll slide him in with Dylan Strome or with the Protas brother they have, or with Connor McMichael or Hendrix LaPierre. They'll slide him in with one of those young guys. He'll play 15, 16 minutes a game. He'll sneak onto their second power play. be on their first penalty kill, he's going to be useful. I would not be surprised if he sees more minutes because, frankly, the Capitals just don't have a lot of guys. See a nice little uptick in his counting stats, and the Capitals try and flip him again and turn a second-round pick into a first-round pick or into a prospect and get more value than the Flames did. And look, the Flames had to. I understand why the Flames did it, but they sold at the lowest possible point. You weren't going to sell Mangiapane at a lower point than you were right now, coming off the season he just had.
No, and I thought that they were going to do what they did with Lindholm last season. I mean, not that he was playing good by any means, but give him a chance to kind of inflate his value. And I mean, even though he played like crap, they still got a solid haul for him. So like, I'm not going to sit here and say like it was a bad idea to do that, because I mean, Flames won that trade. But I don't know if it's because like I've always rooted for Mangiapane that I'm like, oh, he's worth more than a mid-round pick, but like that's all you're getting.
It's disappointing. We're going to talk about it in the next segment, so I don't really want to step on it, but they're opting for volume. They are going as many cracks at the can as humanly possible on the lotto ticket strategy, that if they have 15 picks over the next 3 years, they're going to turn 5 of those into roster players. That's the logic based on what they've done so far. I thought they definitely could have gotten more from Mangiapane. I'm a little bit surprised they didn't retain salary to try and get something better, because frankly, if you get Mangiapane's number down to like 2.5, I definitely think someone would have given you a first-round pick for him. So I was a little bit surprised to see that. I know they're retaining on Markstrom, but Mangiapane expires this year. It's not like you would be retaining salary for multiple seasons. So there's a lot of, I won't say doubt, but definitely hesitancy on my part on what the vision is. I understand the plan, but I think you're staking a lot on your ability to draft well and develop well. And that's a multi-year process. That's 2, 3, 4 seasons down the road before you can honestly start to be held accountable for your decisions. And I think that's a real crutch a lot of GMs use. And I'll be fair, Conroy was put in a position where he basically didn't have a choice, because none of the guys that were pending free agents wanted to stay other than Backlund. Other than that, he didn't really have a choice. He could have gotten more for some of these guys. He did really well on Lindholm. I'll give him credit for that. But it just feels, as a Flames fan, so you're telling me I have to wait 3 years, 2 years? Like, not only do I have to wait 3 years for the team to be competitive, for us to have a new building, I got to sit through 3 years of being like Sharks, Blackhawks bad before any semblance of hope is coming. Especially, I don't know if you saw the report today about that teams had called about Kadri, and the Flames were like, we don't have an interest in doing it. Why not? Why not? If somebody is willing to take even half of that contract for the rest of its duration, that's $4 million you could be using for something else.
Right. And I talked about it on yesterday's show, but just approaching this kind of like how Arizona did. Yeah. You take on those bad contracts and you need to get to the floor, and you stockpile draft picks, and you just make a nice little sample platter of all your draft picks and send them off and use them, because, well, you have to do something. But coming up next, we're going to dive more into the Flames and what this volume strategy is, because Craig Conroy is being very aggressive, and it's very different from years past for the Flames. And we will be right back after this. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're getting your podcasts and on YouTube so you can stick through this rebuild with us, because misery loves company.
All you got is community in tough times.
Yeah. And, I mean, it feels like it's going to get a little bit tougher.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, we talk about the idea all the time. Eventually, when the bill comes due, the longer you stave it off, the more brutal it's going to be. I don't think the Flames will be Sharks or Blackhawks bad. They could be Sabres bad. They could be Senators bad for a good 4 or 5 years, where they'll be in the mid-70s for points. They'll never pick higher than 5th or 6th. And they're really going to need to nail their development process, because they're going to have enough functional pieces that they won't be hot garbage. The team's going to be abysmal to watch, especially stylistically, but they're not going to be as untalented as the Sharks were this year, where basically if you had a pulse and you have played in the AHL, the Sharks and David Quinn were going to give you a shot to play this season, because they had no vested interest in trying to improve their team. The Flames are going to try. All of these prospects they've acquired in trades over the last 12 months, they're going to give them as much opportunity as possible to be something. Whether or not they actually get anyone impactful, that's the real question. And it's really hard to do that without the traditional market factors, where, you know, you can get somebody to come in free agency or restricted free agent, or B, if you're not picking first through third. You know, look where Detroit is. That, I think, is the most likely outcome for what Calgary ends up being. They're going to pick in the top 5 to 10. They'll get a Lucas Raymond. They'll get a Mo Sider. That's really all they have to show for being mediocre for the last 5 years. You think about the Svechnikov brother they drafted, who didn't really pan out. You think about Rasmussen, who didn't pan out. Fabian Zetterlund, who didn't pan out. They've drafted pretty high, but not high enough. And they have really tried to turn over that roster. But what did they end up doing? They gave David Perron a bunch of money. They gave Andrew Kopp a bunch of money. They traded for DeBrincat and gave him a bunch of money. I don't think DeBrincat is in the same tier as, say, Kopp or David Perron, but you're trying to get credibility because you can't develop it, because it's really hard to get good players. By definition, that's what makes a player special. Is, you know, there's only 25 to 50 elite players in the league. If you don't have one of those guys, there's no point. Like, objectively speaking, there's no point in playing the season if you don't have at least one. If you want to win the Stanley Cup, you need 4 or 5 of those guys.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see them put so much like investment into the draft. Like, obviously that's a very good sign, but their drafting history isn't all that great. And I mean, you got to develop these guys, and it doesn't feel like the players they have drafted in years past, other than a select few, have had those qualities to truly be an impactful player, a consistently impactful player at the NHL level.
It's hard. That's the thing. Everybody loves draft. Don't get me wrong. I love draft picks. They can be anything. They can even be NHL players. But you actually have to be able to turn them into something. Think about how long the Sabres have been bad. Think about all the guys that just won a Stanley Cup on Florida that were in the Sabres organization at one point. Think about all of the players that have passed through Buffalo at various points of the last 10 years. You could talk Eichel, Ryan O'Reilly, Sam Reinhart. You can go down the list over and over. You can draft guys. That's great. If you don't win anything, it doesn't matter. Draft picks buy you time. They don't buy you anything else. You can draft as high as you want for as long as you want. Hell, I'll give you the Rangers even. If they don't sign Panarin, if Shesterkin isn't drafted in 2014, if Adam Fox's dad isn't a Ranger fan, you know, if all the Rangers have to show for their rebuild is Alexi Lafreniere, Capo Caco, and Keandre Miller, that team's not that good. They had Panarin, Shesterkin, and Fox fall into their laps. You need a lot to go right to go from bad to mediocre to good. The Rangers cut the line. It is really, and a lot of people will say, oh, well, look at what Dallas is the extreme outlier. Yeah. Nobody is going to draft Jake Ottinger, Jason Robertson, and Rope Hintz all in one draft. No. That is the most outlier of outlier drafts imaginable. You don't get 3 roster players in one draft more than once a decade. Once a decade, you get that type of production. Maybe this is it. Maybe the Flames draft 3 roster players this year or next year. And God bless, maybe that is the case, but that's just really unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like whenever people talk about the rebuild, it's like there's no like middle ground. It's extreme outliers. Like, oh, we can do this like Dallas, or oh my God, we're going to be horrible like the Senators and Buffalo for the rest of my life.
The funny thing is the Senators and Sabres are trying. They're just not good at it. They're trying to be good teams. Remember, the Sabres traded for Taylor Hall. They brought in Jeff Skinner. The Senators, they traded for DeBrincat. They traded for Chychrun. They brought in Korpisalo. Both of those teams have actively tried to not be bad, and they just haven't been able to do it.
Now, is that because of the players that they've put around these guys? Is it, I mean, I think Buffalo's the coaching, whoever.
I think it's more than just that, but that's part of it. I think you look at the turnover there. I don't think anybody's able to build up any institutional credibility where, like, if you're there too long, you start to kind of stop caring. You know, you think about what Ryan O'Reilly said when he got to St. Louis, where he said Buffalo was so bad, I stopped loving hockey. Like, it's hard to care when you are that bad for that long. And that's why the Flames are not going to trade Kadri. They're not going to trade Weegar. They're not going to trade Anderson because they don't want to be the Senators. They don't want to be the Sabres. But the flip side of that is you do eventually have to prove concept. All the Flames need to do is have one guy they draft this year be something next year. He doesn't need to be great. If they draft one guy, if they draft somebody 9th overall, and he cracks the top 9 opening night, give me something. Give me a sign of hope. And I know we're talking about the long-term vision, and I wasn't here when Markstrom got traded, but you're going into the season next year with 2 guys who have never started more than 30 games in a season, 2 guys who have never had a starter's workload behind what's going to be a very bad team. You are not putting either of those guys in a position to succeed, and maybe that's the plan. Maybe they're just going to take their medicine and be hot ass, and they'll figure it out eventually. But it is really difficult once you start building a team that way, going down that path of Sharks or Blackhawks, to get on the tracks. You know, Kyle Davidson said the other day, well, I don't know if we're going to spend in free agency. Well, brother, you spent the last 2 years being as bad as humanly possible. You've got one of the generational guys. If you're not going to try and spend to add, you know,
do
a Sam Reinhart or a Stamkos, or if you're not ready to throw, you know, $2.5 million over what the asking price was, like what they did for Corey Perry. Remember, they gave Corey Perry $4 million a year last year, which was at least a $3 million overpay just to get him in the door. If you're not willing to do that as a rebuilding team, you are going to be very bad.
Yeah. So hopefully, Conroy is paying attention and has paid attention over this last decade, because I think there have been a handful of examples. And I think that it helps that he has been a player. So he has like that mentality of, would I want to play in this situation, or how to entice people and things like that. But are we ready to wrap up this segment and head on to the final home stretch?
Oh, goodness, yes.
All right. So we will be right back to talk about the draft that is happening tonight and this weekend. And we will be right back after this. I love sports. Nick loves sports. And we never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have ended, we get fewer and fewer games, and these sports aren't sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets us keep the sports going whenever we want. All we have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime we feel like it. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to fanduel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us today. I hope you are enjoying your week, and thank you for making Locked On Flames part of your day. We're about an hour, I would say, from Macklin Celebrini's arrival, announcement, commitment to San Jose.
The Storks dropping him off in San Jose in an hour.
Well, he has connections there, so it's gotta feel kind of homey, I guess. But
yeah,
I mean, neither of us are completely locked in on prospects.
Draftniks they're a separate niche.
Yeah.
We are NHL people. We don't watch college. We don't watch the OHL. We don't watch the CHL. We don't watch the QMJHL. We don't watch the SEL. We don't watch the German League. We don't watch the Dutch League. We don't watch the Swiss League. We watch the National Hockey League. We rely on other people when it comes to prospects because that's not our area of expertise.
Who do you think, after viewing these mock drafts, and who do you think the Flames pick?
Jerome's kid. If he's there, they're going to take him. This is the NHL. The Coyotes took Shane Doan's kid, who had no business being drafted in the third round. They're going to take Jerome's kid. He's ready. He's a reasonable pick in that range. He fills a need. And the NHL likes a good nepotism hire. They do.
Yeah, but what if other teams pick
That's perfectly reasonable. Then they have to have contingencies. I was talking about this the other day in regards to the Oilers, because they had to have a plan for if Ken Holland was making the draft picks or if someone else was going to be, because they didn't know until yesterday. Granted, the Oilers don't have a first round pick, so they didn't need to know today. They needed to know by tomorrow. But still, at that point, you need to have multiple contingencies. We know there's conjecture about teams trying to trade up. We know the Devils may or may not be moving off of 10. We know a few teams have tried to move up to 4. I don't know who these people want, because even the draftniks are all kind of in agreement that this isn't a particularly good draft, that you would be better off trying to roll these picks into next year. But all I need is a direction. That's what I want from the Flames. We went into last year saying, okay, either commit to making the playoffs or start selling pieces off. And they started selling pieces off. So they achieved the first step in this process. Now you need to show me a direction. What type of team are you trying to build? What's going to be the style? What are the Flames going to look like 2 years from now when they're supposedly going to be competitive? That starts tonight with their first round pick.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so hard to tell what any of these kids are going to turn into, regardless. You could put one player in one system and have him not do great. And then if, he could have been dropped in another one and could have seen great success. It's more than just the player, and rather the people. Not everyone's a cookie cutter. People are different. They learn different. They focus on different skills. And I hope for the Flames' sake that they make the right call tonight. I don't know what that right call is. And like we talked about earlier, we're not going to know for a couple of years, more than likely. So, Craig Conroy and team, good luck, because this is on you now.
It's the development and the scouting. Those are going to be the people that define whether or not the Flames are a good team. I talk about this all the time in regards to football, because it's especially glaring in football, but fit matters almost as much as talent. If you are put in an organization where you're not given opportunity, or you're given too much opportunity, you hit the wall very quickly. You think about some of the guys who've been drafted very highly over the last handful of years, especially the guys who got their draft year or the year before that messed up by COVID, where their season got canceled. So we got to remember, Alexis Lafreniere went 9 months without playing hockey between the end of his junior season and playing his first game for the Rangers. You think about Slavkovsky, who had a really rough first season, but his second season, he looked like he started to put it together and had some confidence to build on. For these young guys, confidence matters so much, and you can only build confidence by being put in a position to succeed. It's really hard. That's what makes this the best league in the world. The fact that it is really hard to succeed here. And that's where we differentiate between the good, the very good, the great, the elite, the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
All accounts are that after Calabrini, it's going to get very, very all over the place. It's going to get fluid. We don't know anything, and the board can change at any moment. You know, we hear that the Sabres were ready to trade their pick to get Marty Necas, and then that trade didn't go through. So be lively, be awake. There's a lot of moving parts to keep track of, and the Flames, they're sitting at 9. You know, they've got to be prepared because they're not really in a position where they're going to control the board. You know, you control the board 1 through 3, and then after that, anything can happen.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's great to see them finally out of that clumpy middle and just actually being in like a single digit spot where, you know, there's more talent, I would say, in most cases. But I feel like Conroy has a million tricks up his sleeves and he has plans. I mean, if you're going to have a trick up your sleeve, I guess Vegas is the place to be. But I don't think that he's afraid to make these moves, which is great because it was like for a decade, things were just, they didn't declare themselves until like the very end. And a decision was either made by a player or the general manager. It didn't feel like there was much like authority from Brad Treliving.
No, I think that's part of the reason you're going to see the Leafs struggle to trade Mitch Marner because Brad is going to be scared to lose another big trade. You know, in theory, Shea Theodore and Logan Thompson and like a 3rd round pick for Mitch Marner is reasonable. Is that actually going to work out for the Leafs? History would tell you probably not because the Leafs never get anything to break right for them.
Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, that's a tough resume. I mean, if we're talking nepotism, Brad Treliving's right up there.
Oh, yeah.
But I appreciate Craig Conroy's approach and how he is maneuvering all of this. It feels like this is the most active the Flames have been pre-draft in a very long time, and feels like it's a good sign.
They're doing something. That's all we wanted, was committing to a direction and acting on it. Now they need to execute their plan. They need to draft who they've envisioned being an essential piece. You know, you're picking 9th overall. You don't really want to be picking this high again. You know, ideally, if you want to pick in the top 10 once or twice, and that's it, because that means you've made some progress. You're getting closer to back to being a playoff team. They're probably going to be picking in the top 10 again next year based on the goaltending and based on some of the other decisions they have to make.
Yeah. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens and what pans out. It's a long road ahead, and you can continue down this road with us here at Locked On Flames. You can follow me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto and Nick at Nick Zararis. You can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And I'll be back later tomorrow, for draft coverage, because we might have the literally next Iginla on our hands. But thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend, and happy early Canada Day.